The supply of increasingly powerful weapons systems, combined with the ongoing transfer of data to Kiev for strikes and the training of Ukrainian soldiers on the territories, makes these states not only participants in an armed conflict with Russia, according to the Hague Convention of 1907 on the rights and obligations of neutral powers in a sea and land war, but also accomplices of the military crimes of the armed forces of Ukraine and national security forces.
When the Russian ambassador took to the floor of the UN Security Council meeting that was called on the topic of the export and sale of weapons to Ukraine, not only to the Ukrainian military, but also to non-state actors in Ukraine, he basically pointed out that under many international treaties, that makes the NATO countries that are supplying these weapons not neutral. They're not neutral if they're supplying weapons to one side. And as he put it, basically we have a situation where Ukraine has functioned as a proxy of the Western countries to wage a war against Russia, that essentially Russia is being targeted by the Western countries and Ukraine is being used for that purpose. And he also went to a point of showing in the meeting that the concern that we hear from Western leaders about the humanitarian situation in Ukraine is pretty phony, especially when not only are they piling more weapons into the country, but on top of that, they are supplying certain weapons that involve depleted uranium, which will have long-term devastating effects on the population and on the agrarian ability of the country. Here's some of what he said about recent shipments.
The fact that Ukraine is used by the West as a testing ground and the West doesn't care about the fate of its population at all can be illustrated by London's decision to supply Kiev with shells with depleted uranium. Britain is well aware of the monstrous long-term consequences for the environment and public health that this is fraught with. The Serbs can still vividly remember being bombed by NATO forces in 1999 when 15 tons of depleted uranium were used.
Now, when the representative of the United States took to the floor, they made accusations against Russia that sound an awful lot like the behavior of the United States during the invasion of Iraq, in which civilians were killed, lies were told, and there were consequences for the entire global community. The hypocrisy of what the U.S. leader had to say was not lost on many. Now, China took to the floor of the UN Security Council meeting and pointed out that the continued flow of weapons from the Western countries into the government in Kiev is going to complicate peace talks and make it more difficult to resolve the conflict. Furthermore, it will make reconstruction in the aftermath of such a conflict very difficult. And ultimately, it will have long-term effects in the region. The Chinese representative spoke about the results of the U.S. flow of weapons into different regions around the world and how even after the initial conflict these weapons were initially used for ended, the results for the region were quite devastating. Now, the Western leaders simply stuck to their script about how they blame Russia squarely and wholly for the conflict in Ukraine. They did not acknowledge Russia's very serious concerns about what could be the effect of these weapons flowing into the region, not just into the hands of the Ukrainian military, but into the hands of criminal organizations, etc. China shared Russia's concerns, but we heard Western leaders just kind of repeating their standard talking points when it comes to the conflict, blaming Russia and not much else.